relaxing way to getting ready to fly the show. It's a warm sunny morning here in Rexburg, Idaho. Pumping in higher wind speeds, but overall perfect morning for a flight show. Let's do this, boys. Locked and loaded. Let's roll.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Legacy Flight Museum's biennial flight show, Thunder over Rexburg. The pilots this year have prepared relentlessly to bring this show to you and give you a glimpse of what it may have been like to see these planes in action back in their day. And of course, let's give a big thank you to the Legacy Flight Museum for organizing this show.
The Legacy Flight Museum was started back in 2006 by my dad, John Bagley. He started collecting some of these old warbirds and started doing air shows and stuff like that, and some air racing as well. And after a while, he kind of had a collection, and he talked about for years actually starting an air museum. One of the things that sets us apart from other museums, almost all of our aircraft are actively flying. You know, we have one jet that doesn't have an engine, and we have a helicopter that doesn't have any rotor blades on it. Everything else is flyable. Now it's always the challenge of finances and time and resources to be able to, you know, keep on top of all the maintenance on everything, but all of our airplanes are able to be flown. And that's a difference, because it's a very different experience to read about or to watch a YouTube video about some historical event versus actually going out and hearing the sound of a Merlin engine, you know, thundering past as it flies by at over 200 miles an hour. You know, there's a difference there, and it takes you back. And for the older generation, it takes them back to a time that they were young. To another generation, it takes them back to when their parents were young. And for another generation, it takes them to a generation that they never even knew. That, to me, has always been one of the biggest pleasures for me in being involved with these museums, is I get to act as a mediator between the people who actually flew these airplanes during World War II, during Korea, during Vietnam, and the new generation who will never really know anything about it unless they really dig in and learn about it themselves. I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of the older generation, and they've given me first-hand accounts. And those accounts aren't always in books. You know, it's that verbal history that can only come from talking to somebody who was there. And then in my own feeble way, I get to share some of those stories with the next generation. And to me, that is one of the highest honors, one of the greatest pleasures of being involved with a museum like this. One of the planes that we have here is called the Mormon Mustang. Now, during World War II, there was actually a pilot named Roland Wright who had 3 confirmed kills against the Germans. He named his P-51 the Mormon Mustang. And we've got P-63 King Cobra. We have a North American T-6, Beech-18 with BT-15. We've got the de Havilland Caribou. This one here is serial number 2. Now, just like all aircraft, and honestly cars as well, number 1's usually destroyed in testing, stress testing. You know, they go and they bend everything, and, you know, not in the air, but on the ground, they bend everything until the breaking point. So number 2, that is the oldest Caribou there is.
It was a carrier, a cargo aircraft that held mainly people. It flew in Vietnam to a lot of dropping off Marines and recovering them. The Caribou was designed for landing short and taking off short. In Vietnam, the mountains are very tall and very short distances. they were bringing in Marines in very precarious situations. So they designed an aircraft to be able to do short field work.
One of the neat collections here, and it's a private collection, spread out downstairs and upstairs, is a private gun and military memorabilia collection. And it's fascinating to me because as people go walking through here, everybody picks up on something different. You know, for me, I read a lot of history books and stuff like that. If you've read the book or watched Unbroken, the Louis Zamperini story, he talks about being in a life raft and having a radio where they were flying a kite that ran the antenna. The string of the kite was the antenna, and and they run a crank to run the emergency radio that helps the search and rescue aircraft find them. We have a few of those here in our displays. We were given a tour, and there was a man who had served in the Navy. Now, he got in here and he starts talking guns. And we take him upstairs, and we have a fantastic gun collection upstairs. And he says, "Oh, that gun right there, that was a piece of garbage. But that's what they issued us, man. It was the worst gun in the world, but that's what they issued us. Man, the second we could, we'd trade for that gun right there. That's the gun we'd trade for, because that was so much better of a gun than this other one over here." And he knew it. That was his history. That was his story. Other people come in here. I've got, friends who ride horses, and they come in and they see the cavalry bits for horses. And, this one guy says, "Man, that's an aggressive bit." And then he stops and thinks about it for a second. He says, "Well, if I'm being shot at, I want an aggressive bit on my horse too." I gravitate towards, the jungle hammocks, and I'm always fascinated by the horse gas masks. There's so much history here, ranging from the Civil War all the way up to, the Iraqi wars. We've got antique vehicles as well. We've got old Fords. We've got, Jeeps that were used in the military during World War II and after. There's a lot to see here.
Pilot, to be able to do stunts in front of a large crowd, they definitely have to have a lot of credentials and a lot of practice time. There's so many things that they have to qualify for to be able to do aerobatics in front of a crowd.
It does give us an opportunity to showcase the aircraft that we've got and, show it to the community where everybody's out here. And
definitely be very well skilled. Especially the low-level maneuvers. The aerobatic pilots there were so well experienced, and I was in awe of everyone that was doing aerobatics. Their experience level and their mental preparedness is spot on. You just can't be in an air show and want to go do aerobatics. There's a lot of qualifications that have to happen before you're even allowed to do an aerobatic in an air show. I think that the museum does this for the community. I think they do it for the veterans, and it gives the community a great opportunity to be able to see the performance capability of what these airplanes are. With the World War II airplanes, to experience something that these veterans went through, and for the kids, to motivate the kids in maybe some shape or way that they haven't seen, and point them in a direction that is motivating for them, excitement, and fun for overall.
Bob Hoover served in the Air Force during World War II. He was interesting. He'd taken flying lessons before he'd ever gotten involved in the war, before the war even started. And he'd kind of taught himself aerobatics as a way to combat his own air sickness. Well, he gets into the Air Force and he starts doing training, and his instructor shows him an aerobatic maneuver. And he says, "Oh, cool." And he does it better than the instructor. He quickly rose the ranks very well because he actually knew how to fly these airplanes. Well, by the time he actually gets shipped out, he ends up getting put into a flight test group. They were shipping crated up airplanes to, I believe it was in Africa. And the group there, they would build them up, and then he was one of the test pilots. And because of that, he got to fly in almost everything that the Allies had. Not just the United States, but he ended up in a lot of, through the years, he ended up in a lot of British aircraft as well. And he ended up finally getting himself into an actual fighter squadron because he'd rather fight than do the test flying, even though his superiors wanted him doing the test flying because he was exceptional at it. He got into a fighter squadron. He was actually flying Spitfires. He did manage to get one kill, but on one of his sorties, he got tangled up with another, with a German fighter. He wasn't able to drop his drop tanks, so he didn't have the maneuverability he needed to be able to fight this German, and the German shot him down. He gets captured, gets sent to Stalag 1 for 18 months, escapes, manages to get to a German airfield, manages to steal a German airplane, flies it out, lands in Russian-occupied area, and the Russians helped him get back to the Allied areas. Fast forward, he retires from the military. He took a job at North American Aircraft. After the war, they built many of our premier fighters and even some bombers. Bob Hoover ended up being highly instrumental in a lot of the development of some of our top fighters post-war. That's what he did for his career. Well, while he was doing that, his superiors thought, hey, it'd be a great idea to have you go out and do some air shows as well to, give us some extra publicity. Well, they weren't allowed to use the modern jets that they were selling to the military, so they went and bought a used P-51. For years, Hoover performed in thousands of air shows in many different airplanes, but primarily the P-51, one of which is a P-51 that we have now. He had several P-51s through the years. This was the last P-51 that he had for himself. He named it Ol Yeller, and one of the reasons why we leave it in the yellow airshow paint scheme that he had, and we leave the name Bob Hoover on it, is because he was such an integral part to the history of aviation, history of military aviation as far as the United States goes. And so to honor him by keeping that paint job on it rather than bringing it to some other military paint job, we feel is just as important as any of the military honors that we give to putting on some of the other traditional paint jobs. This generation today has more access to more information than any generation in history. And with so much to do and so much to learn and so many opportunities to learn, if it weren't for these aircraft, we wouldn't be where we are right now. These aircraft ensured that we stayed in a free nation. And we stayed a free nation. And you look at the aircraft that were being flown at the beginning of the war versus what was being flown at the end of the war, and what came out in the next decades afterwards. Most of the progress that happened between the first flight of Orville and Wilbur Wright and the moon landing,
Tranquility Base here.
so much
The Eagle has landed.
of the advancements
That's one small step for man,
can be traced to that handful of years.
one giant leap for mankind.
There is a wealth of information in that museum, and museums all over the country for that matter. The fact is, the knowledge base that we have currently, that we ain't getting any younger. And so having young people to come in and look at this and be motivated any way, shape, or form, taking care of the airplanes, moving the airplanes around, learning something about them, learning about other history that is so invaluable to keeping these things flying, and also creating an opportunity for even possibly a career.
Without the advancements that were made during that time, without the character that was built up in the soldiers, in the pilots, in the seamen, in the young women who were working in factories, delivering airplanes, and every other job that they had to do with little to no thanks, would you be where you are right now? These airplanes are heirlooms from a great time of great advancement. Now, it was a technological advancement. We're dealing today with all of the digital advancements, all the artificial intelligence and everything else. And one day there will be, museums dedicated to this time in history. But what we're doing here is we're trying to save the history from World War II, Vietnam, and Korea, and as much other history as we can. And share some of the tools that were used by our ancestors to give us the future that we have right now. That's why it's important. Because without this, we wouldn't be where we are. And by understanding this, we'll know where we need to go.